The senator from Vermont.
Thank you. Mr. President, last week, the United Nations General Assembly voted overwhelmingly in favor of a resolution that acknowledged that Russia brutally invaded Ukraine. Among those voting in favor were all our friends and allies. Among those voting against it were most of our adversaries: Russia, Iran, North Korea, Nicaragua, and the United States. You know, of course, no Americans that we represent want to see our country on a team with some of the world's most brutal dictators. But what made that vote remarkable was that the Trump administration voted against something so unquestionably true. It was Russia that was the invader, that Russia's invasion has been devastating, that too many have died, too many have suffered, that peace is long overdue, and that Ukrainian territory is Ukrainian territory. Bottom line, this was a very simple resolution asserting that one country has no right to invade another country. And Americans know from experience that peace in the world, it depends on adhering to a core principle. Countries cannot change their borders by force. One country cannot steal the sovereign territory of another country. And over the years, many Americans have died to uphold this principle for our national security. World War I, World War II, the Gulf War sent a clear message. America will support its friends and allies who are fighting to defend their own freedom and sovereignty. And of course, the UN vote last week was followed by the last week meeting in the Oval Office between Ukrainian President Zelensky and President Trump. And just hours before that very disastrous meeting, right across from the White House, I, along with many of our colleagues, joined in a bipartisan group of senators who met with President Zelensky. And he told us he was extremely grateful for America's help. He told us how thankful he was for the help President Trump gave in his first administration with delivery of Javelin missiles and what he was doing in his second administration. There was not a hint of anything other than support and respect. And he told us how enthusiastic he was about meeting with the president and signing the minerals deal. It blew up. And of course, the press will debate whether President Zelensky derailed the meeting because he didn't wear a suit, or he said a provocative thing, or he was rude and not grateful enough. And others will say that it was a setup by the president to derail the meeting. You know, my view, I don't know the answer to that, and I don't really care, because that is not the question. The one question that is profoundly important is the one that affects our national security. Whose side are we on? Do we continue to side with Ukraine against Russia in its invasion, with our NATO allies, with the principle we've fought for since the beginning of the last century, or do we flip sides and go with Putin? And there is every reason for many of us to be concerned about that being a question actively under consideration by the Trump administration, starting with his affection for Putin and with his assertion that it was Ukraine, not Russia, that started the war. You know, we're suddenly confronted with this unthinkable question of whether our president is realigning whose side we're on. And that, in my view, is why all of us in the United States Senate, and there's been tremendous leadership on the Republican side of the aisle. I'd like to particularly acknowledge the leadership of Chairman Wicker and Chairman Risch for us to stand with Ukraine and with our NATO allies. But this year, we're going to celebrate the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II. And in the 8 decades since that devastating war, America's global alliances and our leadership, they've been anchored on the principle that no country should seize and occupy the territory of another country by force. That matters. It is anchored on the elementary principle that might does not make right. Something that in the Putin invasion, where he thought he'd be in Kyiv in days, was desecrated. So, Mr. President, my hope is that we in the United States Senate would reaffirm those principles of territorial integrity and do that on behalf of the American people. And I have introduced a resolution that does just this. It commits to the principle that the United States remains totally in favor of upholding and defending the proposition that no state shall threaten or use force against the territorial integrity or the political integrity of any other state. I think all of us know that's among the most fundamental propositions holding together the world's very fragile peace. It's also a fundamentally American principle that we have advocated for and defended. And it's a principle that we must uphold today on behalf of the people and the sovereignty of Ukraine, not just for their benefit, but for our national security. And therefore, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to the consideration of S-Res 113, which was submitted earlier today. Further, that the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, and that the motions to reconsider be considered, made, and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Is there objection?
Mr. President.
The senator from Wyoming.
Thank you, Mr. President. Reserving the right to object, and for the reasons I've given previously, we want the killing to end. We want the bloodshed to stop. There are active negotiations going on right now, and I think that the best hope to achieve lasting peace in Ukraine is by the efforts of President Trump today. And for that reason, Mr. President, I object.
The objection is heard.